Hi, I'm Paul Edwards. I'm an independently published horror author and, first and foremost, a monster kid. Tonight, I'm watching Daughter of Dr. Jekyll from 1957, starring Gloria Talbott and perennial B-movie bad penny John Agar. If you're watching a video like this in the first place, I'm sure you know that the character of Dr. Jekyll came from Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a novella that was first published in 1886. By the time the movie we're talking about tonight was made, there had already been a number of prominent Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie adaptations, most of which were based on a popular stage play. In 1920, there had been a silent film version starring John Barrymore, grandfather of Drew Barrymore. Yes, really, look it up. In 1931, there had been an excellent movie adaptation starring Frederick March. And in 1941, there had been a popular movie adaptation starring Spencer Tracy. And there's an interesting side story to that where they wanted the Spencer Tracy version to be the definitive version, and they tried to bury the fact that there had ever been a Frederick March Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is a shame because now the Frederick March one is relatively lesser known, and it is an excellent film. So if you haven't caught that one, I really recommend it. So those were excellent Jekyll and Hyde movies. Now we come to Daughter of Dr. Jekyll. Okay. So there had been a film called Son of Dr. Jekyll in 1951. And that story, as you might imagine, was only loosely based on the events of Robert Louis Stevenson's novella. The same guy who wrote Son of Dr. Jekyll, 6 years later, wrote this story, Daughter of Dr. Jekyll. And when the film begins, there's an eerie, smoky laboratory scene. And you see the silhouette of a Mr. Hyde-like figure who's got a vial of chemicals. And the narration says, you know, the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde ended when the fiend was killed and the whole public was relieved that never again would the sinister Mr. Hyde stalk the streets. And the silhouetted figure looks at the camera and goes, "Are you sure?" We're going to come back to that. So when the story begins, Gloria Talbott's character is Janet Smith, and she and her fiance, played by John Agar, are visiting the house that she grew up in. She grew up as an orphan, and she was in the care of a guardian. And her guardian reveals to her that now that she's about to come of age, it's about to be her 21st birthday, he has a secret to share with her. She's not really Janet Smith, which is what she's thought her whole life. She's actually Janet Jekyll. Her father was Dr. Jekyll, and because of the notoriety of what happened to him, her true identity had been kept secret since her birth. So now she has second thoughts about marrying John Agar's character because she's worried that if she gets married and they have children, that the children might inherit the Mr. Hyde trait from her. Okay, so this is the whole driving force of the movie, is whether or not Janet Jekyll has inherited the Mr. Hyde transformation. Okay, well, already we're off to a really shaky start because if you are even vaguely familiar with the story, you know that Dr. Jekyll invented a chemical formula that changed him into Mr. Hyde. It wasn't an inherited trait. It wasn't a genetic trait in him. So there would be no way that his offspring could inherit this, she would need the Mr. Hyde formula to transform her, logically, right? Incidentally, people seem to misunderstand the original transformation. In the book, Dr. Jekyll was really not all that great of a guy. The popular vision that we have of Jekyll and Hyde is that Dr. Jekyll was this virtuous man, and he wanted to find a way to separate man's good nature from his evil nature, and so he could set the evil nature aside and have everybody be good. That's the way that the movies presented it. The Spencer Tracy movie presented it that way. The John Barrymore movie presented it that way. The overlooked but great Frederick March movie presented it that way. But that's not the way it was in the novella. In the novella, Dr. Jekyll was generally well behaved, but he also wanted to entertain his vices. And because he was a respectable member of the community, he didn't want to be recognized when he did it. So he developed this formula that would change his appearance so that he could go out and do evil things and not face consequences as Dr. Jekyll. So we've really sort of retconned the Jekyll and Hyde story in popular culture. But be that as it may, the drug was needed for the transformation in any version of Jekyll and Hyde. Otherwise, the story doesn't even make sense. At least the drug was needed for the transformations in the first place. And there's a chilling point in the story in the novel where the transformation happens without use of the drug. But that's because it's already in his system. Okay, so let's put aside the fact that the driving motive of the young woman here makes no sense. She's conflicted about whether or not she should go ahead and marry John Agar. And of course, he's trying to persuade her that this is not a genetic factor. But mysteriously, young women in the village start being killed brutally. And also mysteriously, Janet cannot account for her whereabouts during the times that these murders have happened. She supposedly has been in her bedroom asleep, but there is physical evidence that shows that there has been somebody coming and going from her bedroom window. And that, together with the power of suggestion, make her think that she has inherited the Mr. Hyde curse, not a literal curse, but the Mr. Hyde condition from her father. Her guardian seems very concerned. He went to medical school with Dr. Jekyll. And in fact, he's so concerned that he uses his abilities as a hypnotist to calm and soothe Janet at night so that she, hopefully will get a good night's sleep and not be plagued by these crazy ideas. Well, the mystery in the movie is who or what is actually doing the killings. And if you're over about 12 years old, I'm sure that just from this description, you can figure out the person who's really responsible for the killings. But that mystery is not resolved until the final reel of the film. And until we get there, what we have is pretty much what you would expect of a 1950s movie trying to recapture the more gothic elements from older horror movies. You've got, misty moonlit scenes. You've got a dream sequence where Janet is imagining herself as a Ms. Hyde on the attack. You've got the theremin music playing, and you can't go wrong with the theremin in a horror movie. I just love it. A theremin can really improve even a terrible movie. Don't believe me? Watch The She Creature. Theremin did a lot for that movie. Anyway, as the movie progresses, there's an angry mob that forms in the village, And they are of the belief that Janet is the murderess because she is Dr. Jekyll's offspring. That secret comes out. And the leader of the village mob, interestingly enough, is a man by the name of John Dirks, who had been in another Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie about 6 years earlier. Not son of Dr. Jekyll, though. He was in Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, obviously a comedy film, which starred Boris Karloff as Dr. Jekyll and a famous stuntman named Eddie Parker as Mr. Hyde. So anyway, the mob is all whipped up. They want to kill Janet. Janet is so confused at this point that she thinks maybe the mob should kill her because she's a menace. And the mob has it in their heads that, number one, that the monster is a werewolf, which the Mr. Hyde monster was not a werewolf, but okay, pretty close. But also they have in mind that the way to kill a werewolf is to drive a stake through its heart. Now, of course, driving a stake through the heart is a customary way to kill a vampire, not a werewolf. According to Hollywood lore, a stake through the heart wouldn't kill a werewolf unless it was silver. Then again, another way to look at it is, if you remember from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when Buffy said she was going to kill a demon by driving a stake through its heart, and somebody said, but it's not a vampire. And she said, you'd be surprised how many things that kills. So, okay. The mob of angry villagers want to kill Janet, and they come reasonably close to achieving that goal, but you can tell in this movie that that's not going to be what ends up happening. And I won't ruin the end for you in case you do catch this film. But when it is resolved, of course, the real culprit does not make it to the end of the movie. And when the movie closes and it looks like everything is all resolved, we go back to that smoke-filled laboratory that we described at the beginning, where there's a silhouette of a Mr. Hyde-like character. And the narration once again says, now the village can rest peacefully because the specter of Mr. Hyde has finally gone away forever. And again, as in the beginning, the shadowy Mr. Hyde figure turns directly to the camera and says, "Are you sure?" It was the kind of thing you could put in the movie in the 50s or 60s that would fly. If you did that now, it really wouldn't work with modern audiences. But I think it probably was pretty effective back in the 50s. Well, this movie, Daughter of Dr. Jekyll, was released as half of a double feature. The other half of the double feature was a science fiction horror movie called The Cyclops. It was a different tone of horror movie than this one. This one had a lot of gothic elements to it. Creepy, spooky environment. The Cyclops was set entirely outdoors, and it was about a giant, a disfigured giant. And they may not seem like movies that would have made a good double feature until you stop and realize that Gloria Talbott starred in both films. That's the connection. So a Gloria Talbott double feature was released. The Cyclops was the first build movie, and this one, Daughter of Dr. Jekyll, the second build movie. You can catch this movie easily enough online. I happen to have got a DVD of it, but you could honestly just find it right here on YouTube or, any number of other places. It is a movie, though, that often gets overlooked. I think that people are more familiar with, like the series of Frankenstein films, the Dracula films, probably because they're better, but also because they were more publicized and were a bigger deal when they were released. This film was not a big deal when it was released. And this one, like Son of Dr. Jekyll, tends to be forgotten. People do, though, still remember the Spencer Tracy Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and the John Barrymore Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And, well, they should. So, depending on what your tastes are, if you like cheap bottom of the barrel horror movies, which I do, then Daughter of Dr. Jekyll is worth catching. It's also not a huge investment of time. It's only a little more than an hour. So it's not like a whole chunk of your life. If you are a fan of more highbrow horror and monster films, I really recommend you check out the 1931 Frederick March Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde if you have not already seen it. It's so good, and it's a shame that it's been somewhat forgotten and because it's been overshadowed by the Spencer Tracy one. I like the Spencer Tracy one too, but I'm a big fan of the Frederick March. You really ought to check it out. And if you are a fan of vintage horror and classic monsters, you should also check out my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. They're available on Amazon.com. I have 6 of them published so far. I'm already working on the next one. I put out about one a year. So by the time you're watching this video, the next one may be out. I use different monsters in different books. The books are all completely independent. You don't reading one story, you're not going to be, roped into reading others if you don't choose to. Each story has a beginning, middle, and end. I would never give you part of a story in a book. I hate when writers do that to me. So the Mourner's Woods books are available on Amazon.com. My name again is Paul Edwards. Thanks for spending some time with me talking about this great old horror movie. And I will see you in Mourner's Woods.